My name is Laurie Skelly, and I'm glad to be here. Pardon the little getting ready. I just got off the train and thought I had another 15 minutes to pull it all together. But I thought today would be a fun workshop to kind of work through some web scraping. We're currently doing a unit that involves a lot of web scraping at the Data Science Bootcamp, where I'm an instructor for Kaplan Metis, and that's going on in New York right now. This has been a really fun project I've been involved with to develop and teach the first course for this new boot camp. And boot camps are so hot right now and everything, but it's been a really great experience to try and put together what we think are the skills that someone needs to be an entry-level data scientist and figure out a way to teach all of that in 12 weeks, and then working backwards and figuring out who we need to admit to make that possible. And so I've been incredibly busy with that. We're just finished week 2, and we have such a great group of people. But we've been having a lot of success working through some IPython notebooks. And if you are accustomed to working with those, you can work along with me. I have a repository on GitHub, so you can clone that if you like, and we can work through some examples together. And I'll also be just chatting a little bit about our kind of philosophies and web scraping in general, and I'll have available after this talk kind of a more formal write-up of those little pieces, because I wanted to spend the time kind of putting together fun examples, because I love web scraping. I think that it's a really fun first step in doing data science. Sometimes it's not a first step at all, but to see someone's face when for the first time you're online and getting information together, it's a really great question. Yes, yep, again. So I am Laurie Skelly on GitHub, and I have a /data-con-scrape. So one of the first things to think about when you're approaching web scraping, you want to get some information from the internet, and the due diligence you need to do first is there an API? So we're taking the assumption, A, that the site you are going after does not have an API available for you to get that information, and B, that you have responsibly looked at the terms of service and understand that your use of their information falls under their desires. So if there's an API, it's a much more courteous way to get the information. You don't want to clunk up their web traffic. And I'm sure that we have a pretty broad range of experience in this room. So if I'm saying something that is really obvious to you, please forgive me. And if I say something that's a little bit over your head, please do stop me. And we can talk about it in more detail, because I think we have as much time as we want to talk today. Yes?
What is web scraping?
What is web scraping? Great. So web scraping is it's a pretty broad term that means getting information from the internet, usually in an automated way, and you can take unstructured data or otherly structured data. You can take data that's in HTML and use it for your own benefit in whatever way you want. So when someone says web scraping, I usually assume that they mean they're getting information from the internet, and they are not using a programmatic interface. They're not interacting with an API. So for me, there are a few different situations in which I want to do web scraping. And the first one that I walk through is something that I do kind of often, and it's when I'm going to a conference like this. I want to check out who's going to be there, who are the speakers. And so that's what the first notebook looks like. We have I use Python 2 for this, and this is probably small. So if you want to work along, You can go through this IPython notebook with us if you want. You need some packages, requests, and beautiful soup. We're going to briefly need the image library, PIL, and Selenium, and dateutil is in the wrong list. Oh no, dateutil is an external package. And if you need to install Selenium, the instructions are in that notebook. It can be a little bit confusing. We're going to use Chrome driver with that. So if you don't have those put together, we'll pause when we get there, and you can put your Chrome driver in the right place and figure out how to get it. Great. So the first thing I wanted to do was to make a little face sheet of people who are here and speaking, so that if I ran into someone in the hallway, I could study up and make sure that I knew who I was seeing, and stop them and chat and make a new connection. And of course, I like to meet people who aren't speaking too, but you always have that experience when you realize you just walked by someone that you know their work and you missed a chance to talk to them. So this is what I did to go through, and I made a face sheet. I guess I can show you the end point before we go through all of this. Okay. So I made a little face sheet, and it's a simple table that I can look through, and it's got some issues. So this is like a first pass. I'm gonna need some cleaning up, and oh, there I am. Oh my gosh. So we're gonna make this. Okay. So in order to get started, I want to use, I need to make a request to the page. I need to figure out where I am looking. And for this, I am at DataCon Boston. Oops, Boston. And I want to find the people who are involved in the session. So the sessions, if I look at this page, here are all the sessions, and when I click through, here's one with David Wiseman. I see there's David Wiseman's name and face. All right, so I want to get all of those. So my starting page is here at datacon/schedule, and so I'm going to save that as my URL. I would usually do that as this. Boop. Nope, that doesn't make any sense. Nope. There we go. Okay, and I use a package called request. A lot of people use URL lib too, but request is super awesome. There's a link to it at the top of the notebook. And when I get and request is really flexible because I have I can use it with web scraping. I can use it for APIs, and it has a really nice, they call it like human-friendly requests. Okay, so I've just gotten my request. I've requested the page, and I put it in the variable R, and I have a response that you get back from that. So when you make a request with requests, you get back a response object, and the really cool thing about that is that the response object also keeps track of what the request that generated it was, and it's right there. So if I want to see the request that I made, I can spit all of that out, and the request has the request is part of the response object. It holds the URL that you use to find that. A really cool usage for this is if you've been redirected, right? So if the URL you used in your request doesn't match the one that's stored there, something weird happened, right? And the request object also has a history. Maybe history, which I probably have wrong. Oh, it's there somewhere. Yeah. So if I are at history, so if I find that the URL in my request is different than the URL I wanted, I can look in my history, and it will have a series of redirects usually, and I can go through there and see what the chain was, and that can be really handy sometimes. So to have that right there is one of the main reasons I use requests. Right. So back to scraping. So R is mainly my response object. And if I want to know what I got in my response, what the content was, and basically this is just like I'm going to a web page and I'm asking for the content. I'm not rendering it. I just have that raw HTML. And this is what that looks like. Very exciting, not very human readable. So I can hide that again. So to parse the content, my main squeeze is beautiful soup. And I'm importing beautiful soup, and I'm going to get that same content, and I'm going to parse it with beautiful soup and turn it into something that we can start to explore. All right, so I souped my content, and if I scroll through what that looks like, it looks the same, but it's not a string anymore. Now it is a beautiful soup object. Okay, and beautiful soup is fun. You can go through it and find all sorts of things. So if I wanted to find if there are any tables here, I could say soup. And if you go to the beautiful soup documentation, there's a link up here. Yep. And it has everything you need, but most of my peers find that the functions that we use the most often, it's usually find and find all. And a few times we use some other things, but we mainly are just going through and finding different kinds of things. And so soup has different ways of operating on this. So if I wanted to look for a particular tag, right? So a tag is something like HTML in general. You can have an image object or anything. I can say soup.findAll, and maybe I want to see all the images. And see how many there were. So I had 2 images on the page, and I could look at each of them. All right, and so I have still the HTML source from there. And then these objects are really interesting. They're fun too, because let's say if I'm looking at the first image object, and I would just want the source of it. So it treats it like a dictionary. Every attribute that the tag has is stored in a dictionary-like object. So I can get the source from that image. Oops, and I want to not do this anymore. Boop. And I can just isolate that. So really quickly, I can go through and collect all of the URLs for the images in a page, and maybe I want those for something. Sounds like it'll be helpful down the line. All right, but first I need to, again, we're starting with this kind of page that is my home, and I'm going to get all the links out of here that I want. And I have several tables here. And, but I don't see a lot of links other than the ones in this table that I want. So maybe the fastest way to isolate the content I'm looking for is to just find all of the links. All right, so I'm going to say, just for now, that I'm going to store all the links. I'm just going to find everything in an anchor tag that starts with that's an A tag. All right, so now we can explore what we just found. And I can either print out that raw HTML or I can skip it a little bit. And I'll show you what I did right here is I take from A, the text of the tag, so it's what the link actually would say rendered on the page. And I can get rid of any extra white space there. And then I can also print next to it what the URL is that it's pointing to. So let's see what we got. All right, so these are all of the links that are on that schedule page on the website for the schedule. So it looks like, for the most part, here's where it starts what I want. So I want all of these sessions, and I can kind of check it out and see if there are any patterns in the URLs. Maybe it'll say datacon/sessions/something, and I can use that to just isolate the ones that I want. And otherwise, let's see, down here, there are a few, just a couple that aren't in the domain datacon.org. So what I can do first is take all of these and isolate them. We'll use a little list comprehension. I'm a list comprehension junkie, so if you ever see one that's just kind of massive and incomprehensible, just ask me to stop and explain what I did, because I get in trouble. You know, the Pythonic coding, you're supposed to be readable, but I will make I'll just get kind of power crazy, and I'll make a triple nested list comprehension, and it comes out in one line, and I'm just like, oh, ha, 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 and then someone's like, that's great, now please make that into something I can understand. Anyway, so this one's not that bad. This just says for all of those, I only want the ones that have datacon.org in the string of its URL. Okay, and then I'm going to see how many of those I had, how many I had originally, how many I have after I filter it, and then I'm going to narrow it down again. So I started with 49. I got rid of 3, great, and then and here are all the ones I have left. So what else can I do? All right, so I'm noticing, and this is nice because it's a smaller conference, there aren't as many sessions, so I can just kind of scan through it with my eyeballs and notice that every single one has a hyphen in this text, right? So it looks like if I filter down for things that only have a hyphen, or a space hyphen space in the text, then I can, maybe I'll have exactly what I want. So I'll uncomment that. All right, so I've gone from 49 links down to 46, now I have 35, and these look really good. So it looks like I've gotten all the sessions I want, and I don't have any extra links. So I can use this as my list of links to go through, visit each of these session pages, and get the person running the session and their picture, so I can make my little face sheet. Okay. Now, I don't know if I've imported this yet. Okay, so I'm going to use Pretty Print because it's going to get ugly in just a second. So now this is exactly what I want. These were my links. Now I don't need anything except for the URLs. And there you go. So this is a list of pages I want to visit and get the information. Okay, so I love IPython notebooks. I actually use them in my regular workflow, and I'll do things just like this. I'll mess around, I'll see what works, I'll get it how I like it to be, and then I'll make a function, and then at the end of my little session, I'll put those in a file that I can reuse. I'll make a class or a module or something, and then I can reuse those later. So at this stage, I want to take the part where we get the soup, and we can make a function. And I've called this function connection. And just to walk through really quickly, we get the request from the URL. I've just initiated soup at this point for later. And another great thing about requests is that if it didn't work, I can just check it out in this very intelligible r.ok. And r.ok will be true or false. So if it's okay, I want to make a soup out of the contents from. And contents and text, when you're getting just a regular HTML from a page, are functionally identical. I tested it on this, and I think one came out as a regular string and one came out as a Unicode string, so go figure. But so this, we could use .content or .text, and it's the same. And if any of those links are not good, it'll warn me, and it'll give me none for my soup. Okay. All right, so I have that function, and let me make sure that it's in my namespace. And now I'm going to collect my raw sessions. All right, so for each URL that I have in my list of URLs, I'm going to visit the page using the function connection. I'm going to get the soup, and I'm going to put this in this list called our raw sessions. And all right, so it's getting and souping each of these pages, and this is taking a second. So anytime that I have a step that's a little bit time consuming, I like to store what it outputs so that if I actually have everything for the session stored just in case the internet broke, I wouldn't be standing up here whistling. but this is pickle. And if you're familiar with pickle, pickle is another Python library where you can serialize and save any Python object, well, nearly any Python object to a file, but a dictionary like this is right up its alley. So I am going to pickle what I found. Okay, the only problem is you can't actually, having said you can pickle anything, soup objects are one of the things that, that resist pickling. So what I do is I unsoup them and then I pickle them. And so I'm being a little bit redundant here, but it's for insurance, which is really important. So as soon as this is done, I'm going to prettify it. I could either use .prettify or I forget. There's another one. This one puts it all on different lines and it still looks nice and quasi-readable. There's another one that just dumps it out in one long string of HTML. Either one is great. So I go through each of my soups and I turn them back into strings, and then I'm going to save them to a file and then make sure that I have done that. And I don't think that I have. Okay. And there, this one, I think I'm the last one. Great. So our last one, this one from an asterisk to a number, so I know it's finished running. And I'm going to pickle what we found. All right, went really fast, great. So, excellent. Not sure which version of this file I'm writing with. Okay, cool. So I made it, and I can do a sanity check by opening it back up. And I should probably do that because I just turned all my soups into, there we go. Okay, so now that we have all these soup objects, I'm going to take one of these sessions, and I don't want it to be me because that's going to be creepy. Let's pick a random one. Okay. Ah! I just souped it. Can't soup a soup, guys. Doesn't work. Okay. So I have the 10th session is the page of one of these items. So we're going to find, we want to find the name and the picture of Rajarshi Guha, who I don't know personally. And if you're here, please forgive me for butchering your name. All right, so we're looking at this page. There we go, lovely. All right, so I want to get this item, the name. It's also up here, and I want the picture. Okay, so the name and the picture are both in that table. So I'm going to find the table and print it out. All right, and here we go. That looks good. That's what I wanted. It's the right table. And just to pause here, we have two different ways to, in Beautiful Soup, there's .find and .find all. So if you use .find, you're going to get back the first instance of whatever it is you're looking for. And if you use .find all, which should come up pretty soon, you'll get all of them in a list. All right, so I have that table, and I notice that the name is in this tag, this first tag called center. So if I look for the first center tag and get the text out of it, so table, I want to find the first center tag, get the text from it, and then take away any extra white space. I should have the name of our speaker. Yay! Okay. And then I want the picture. So the same thing, I want to look in the table. There's only one image in the table, so I found it. There we go. And then I just want the source from that. So out of this library, I want the attribute source, src, and I'll find the location of that image. If I click it, Okay, so you might already be feeling pretty excited about how powerful we are. So I made a couple of functions just to speed this up a little bit to get the people out of the sessions. And so what this one does is for each of the sessions in our raw session, we're going to find the speakers. And you can tell I've done some debugging because it turns out some of these sessions are team taught. So I was running into issues when I was using that. I'd made a function out of what we just did, and then Joe and John, it wasn't pretty. So we need to handle cases in which there's more than one speaker. So now we find the table, and here's the find all command. So I can go back up here where we have the table. Okay. And I have table, and I've been just finding the first instance of things, but I can do something like find all, and I want each row. And so rows is a list of rows in the table. So I go through and I want from each row I find all the rows, and then just to figure it out in the second row, which is indexes 1, I see how many pictures there are, and I get that many names and pictures from that. So then I end up with a list of tuples that give me the name of the speaker and and their picture. So actually and then I insert it in here, I find the URL of that picture, and then I'm going to save it locally. And then my save it locally, we can look at this too. All right. So this one I wanted to take a look at because I'm going to use a little bit of fanciness. So when I make a request for something like an image, so where is this one? We can do this live together. Okay. So now I can look at what I found, and do you think we're going to see a picture? No. We're going to see, content. Oh, right? So not a picture. So I need to turn this into a picture so that I can save it. And for that, I can use the image module from Python image library and string IO. All right, so I'll show you down here now the same thing. So we get the open the content as an image. So use string IO and the image library to open it. And then we have kind of an image object from that image library. And then I can save it with the type and then give back the file name up here. All right, so now I want to go through and get all of those faces from my sessions. Namespace, namespace, okay. All right, and there they go. So some of these have 2, some of them have 1. And for this, I decided to just make a little markdown table. I could do a much nicer job doing a regular HTML table or something else, but I'm sure someone else is like, you should use this package. And I'll say, thanks. I didn't know that yesterday. And but that's what I did. And they have like little periods at the top because I was failing at doing it without headers. So whatever. So now I'm going to make a datacon face sheet. And I should end up with this markdown table at the end. It still needs a little bit of debugging. We have speaker is in here, I think like 4 times, which I just noticed before as I got up here. But a couple more tweaks and I'll have a very nice sheet I can print out, carry around with me, and then be that weird girl looking at everybody's faces and then going up and shaking their hands. Okay, so that's an example of kind of like a one-shot thing. And kind of the basics of using requests and Beautiful Soup to get what you want out of a web page. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, great. All right, so the next thing I wanted to do, I think I really wish I had renamed my workshop like doing anything you can to avoid using Selenium, because nobody really wants to use Selenium. And if you don't know what that is, Selenium is a web driver. So it's a way to operate a web browser programmatically. And let's see, you can just start a new one. Am I asking for danger? Yeah, we'll save that for a second. And so the reason that you might use Selenium rather than using Beautiful Soup is that there are a lot of times page elements that load dynamically. They could be asynchronous, they could be using AJAX calls, but sometimes when you get the HTML of a page, and then you are looking at your browser, doing what we were doing, kind of comparing and inspect element and looking for it in your soup, it's just not there. And the first time you can feel very sad and kind of betrayed. But when there is asynchronous loading, your request object, it just cannot, it doesn't wait. It just gets what's there immediately, including all the scripts and everything, and you just get what you get. So if you're in a situation where you need to make it wait for you, you sort of need to use an actual browser instance. Well, I guess you could get around it if you're very clever and like writing your own stuff. But for me, the simplest way is to open up a robot web browser and to let everything just run itself as it would if I were just using my own browser, and then to collect the HTML at that point or to pull them out using Selenium. But there are a lot, Selenium is not the friendliest thing. There are Python bindings for it, and we'll get to those. But a lot of times there are nice workarounds where you don't have to do it. If it were the case like this, actually the last conference, they have since retired the page, but the last time I did this was for a conference called SourceCon, and they had all of their information collapsed. Right? And so I was getting ready to use Selenium and have it click on each person's, open it up to get the details. I wanted their Twitter handles and stuff like that for that one. And then I realized that they had a button that said expand all, and that page was the only one that I was going to be scraping. So one trick that you can do is, if it's just one page, if you're not automating it, if it were something on each of these pages that I needed to load, that would be an issue, and I'd want to be sure I could do it in an automated way. But if I'm just scraping one page and I have some loading issue, what I can do is let it load up in my browser and then use my developer tools window, and I just really cheat. If you collapse something down here, highlight it, and copy it, you have the entire you have the entire contents of that tag. So there is all of the HTML for that file. So that is my favorite sneaky workaround to not use Selenium if I'm doing a one-shot. All right, and how how did I make that full screen? Oh, God. Okay, cool. So I recently found a second workaround, which made me really happy, and I'm scraping some Metacritic data, and Metacritic is a site where they aggregate reviews about movies and things like that. Critic, the URL is probably right there. So I'm looking at movies that have just opened on this page, and I'm using them just for my own personal benefit out of curiosity. So I am within the terms of service, and I'm not making any money off of this workshop, so I don't think even indirectly that would be a problem either. So I want to see all these movies that are in theaters, that they're in wide release or in limited release, and I want to go through and get their score. I want to know how many critic reviews there are, and I just wanted to kind of look at the distributions of the different reviews. I think the grand idea I have for that was to start to see which reviewers follow the pack, which would involve, so if you have movie reviews coming out over time and people are reviewing them and they're getting the score, so if I can say, like, what was the historical consensus at the time that this one was published, and if there are, and then going through all the different reviews, because they have a lot of data, to see if there are any reviewers who tend to be more influenced by the herd. And this is just the little baby beginning of that. For this Metacritic thing, we kind of start out the same thing. And Metacritic, one thing that you can also do in the requests library is to change your headers. So if I just use the default headers, I probably have an R object here, right? Yeah, great. Okay, so if I have one of these, like this, dang it. That header. Yeah. So these are the headers that I send out with my request, just as a default using Y. Okay, fine. Oh. Just as a default when you use request. So it says, who are you? And it says, oh, I am a robot made by Python requests. I'm a program. And sometimes they don't really like that, even if their terms of service say that you can totally scrape their site. So sometimes you get an error and you get r.not okay. And so changing your headers to say, I'm not a robot, really. I'm really just a normal Chrome browser. It's fine. So you can do that by changing your headers. So in this one, I said I found like a nice normal header, and I stuck that into my request. And this is if you've done this in a different, trying to do this with URL-lib2, this part you're like, oh man, maybe I will check out requests, because doing it in 2 lines is really nice. Great, so, and this class idea is old. Okay, so for this one I have kind of the same connection, only this time I am using a different header. And great, and r.ok was not okay. Oh, that was something else. I just want this normal page. This is one that was killing me. Okay, so I'm going to get this page, and oh. Duh. Shh. Oh, right. So that one already did it and everything. Okay. Sorry. All right. So now I have my soup from that page. Oh, boy. Can I make this bigger? There you go. All right. I've got all sorts of stuff in here, and I can look through my Metacritic page. Make it big. And so I have these two things, and I found out that these are called modules. I'm going to kind of spin through this one a little bit faster because I don't want to bore you. But I made, let's see, where does this start? All right, so I've got this Metacritic list page, and I want to get the modules. So I found these things that are called modules, and basically it turns out that they're calling these two lists modules. I wonder if I can make this bigger? Yeah. Nice. All right, so I want to find my two classes in here that are modules, and I tested it, and I found that they're just, if I look for the class module, I get two of them, which is lovely. And if you're not that familiar with HTML, why that works is because when you say class equals, you have different classes separated by spaces. So either one of these product groups module or module would return this big div. All right, so when I look for modules, I get two of them, one for wide release and one for limited releases. And I in my get modules, I make a module dictionary, and I go through each of those, and I find that which release type that is, whether it was a wide release or the limited release, and inside that there's an ordered list that has all the different movies, and I get all of the LIs from that. So .contents, that's another one that's helpful in Soup, is you can get everything that's exactly one level below in the DOM. So that's a nice trick, because usually when you're looking through lists, all your list items are exactly one level below. It turned out that this one also had some little divider lines that were ruining my life. So I had to say, of those, I wasn't getting just a clean set of list items. So I used a list comprehension, like I like to do, and make sure that I'm only keeping the tag objects. So those are my list items. And then I say, in my module dictionary, I add to the wide release or limited release those movies, and then I have that module dictionary. All right, so I go through each of these, and I'm going to parse each movie, and this is the fun part for me. If you think that this is really boring, I apologize, but web scraping is I think it's really cool. I don't know why, and I was asking people, why is web scraping so fun? And they're like, it's kind of like trespassing and then organizing your desk really nicely. And if you're into both of those things, you're probably into web scraping. So I go through each of these list items, and I want the score, I want the name of the movie, I want the release date, and there should be a link in there somewhere, so I want to go through to the actual movie page. So this is sort of like on the conference page, where I'm going to end up generating information. I'm going to generate a bunch of links, and I'm going to visit and get more information. But I can also grab a little bit just to start. So when I'm parsing these list items, I parse movie LI. Here we go. And so I use these various things. And these are all available that you can look at these in detail. But I'll go through the list item, and I find the product title that'll give me the title div. Then I can get the text out of that and store it as a title. I can find the relative URL from this magic. I can get the overall Metascore and the release date, and then I start collecting these movies. And a couple of those have little helper functions too. All right, so I bang on this until it all works, and then what I do is I make a file that keeps all of these functions, and then they're all ready to go, and it's very fun. All right, so I parse that first page again, and I'm ready to use each of these to visit the URL of their critic information. So let's see. So what I want here is when I go to Dolphin Tail, is this one I'm looking at? Yeah, Dolphin Tail, I have this relative URL. So I need to stick that onto metacritic.com, and then what I really want are these critic reviews. So I'm clicking around in the browser and figuring out what these patterns are. And so this is like where I want to start. So I want to get my relative URL and stick it in the middle of this Metacritic and critic reviews. And then I want to get this information from the page and start scraping it. So now I'm on Datacon Metacritic 2. And is that what that's called? Yep. So now I'm importing those functions I made in the other notebook, so I can use them here. So anything you see MCS is the that module with all of the, was it a module? File with all the functions in it that I made before. I need pickle. I love date util. Now we're going to actually use it. And requests. I have my base URL, and then you're going to see that it actually turned out that this is a little preview of the workaround. Okay, so I need to get these in my namespace. It is too. Pickle is not defined. That's right. Okay. All right, so I have my movies in here. And let's see, what is movies? Actually, movies is a list. What does a movie look like? Okay, so this is what it ended up with after I parsed that first page. I've got a title, the identical. It's in wide release. I used parse util to figure out the date. Oh, that was in the last one. So if you haven't used date util before, it's really fun because you don't have to define the string of how they put the dates together. It's just really good at guessing how they formatted the date. You can add if you're thinking ahead of me, you're like, well, what about European versus American dates? You can set which one is the default. So if it just finds two numbers, you're like, it's probably going to be day month, or it's probably going to be month day. But other than that, usually, and I think it likes Americans better, so sorry. But if you're American and you just toss a date string into it, it can convert that into a date object. So all of these have nice date objects, and I didn't really do much to make that happen. And I know it's relative URL. Okay, so what I usually like to do is find a way to just run through them as quickly as I can, collect up the ones that didn't work without breaking my script. So I have really bad habits here. Just it'll accept anything that doesn't work at all. So don't send me to code jail. But just to see how I'm doing. And so this will go through all of the movies, and let's see how many movies I have. I think it's like 100 and something, 171. So it'll go through, print the title as it's parsing it. I also had to check for a redirect. That's what that like weird module up there was. There's one that just wasn't working. And I can show you what that was in just a second once I start this rolling. All right, so it's going to catch the bad guys, put them in bad guys so I can go see what's going on, and then add Movie title. What happens to the movie? That's not very smart. Anyway, okay, good guys. Oh, it's pricing the movie. Oh, right. Okay, so that all gets taken care of down there. Woo! Who saw that happen? Okay, great. All right, so it's going through my movies and taking a really long time. So each time it parses one of them, it should spit out the movie title and what is it doing while it's there. Or later, mystery. Okay, let's just hide that because no one wants to see it. Mysteries. Okay. So I have parsed movie reviews of the movie. So parsed movie reviews, what I first was going to do was to look for, if you see this, I have either 30 or 100 per page, and right now it's set at 100 per page. And what happened was I had one of those heartbreaking experiences where it said 100 per page, give me everything. And then when I looked, lo and behold, I only had 25 movies. And I was like, where's the rest of my movies? So I was like, okay, maybe if I say 30 movies, it'll give me all 30 movies, and that'll be better. So I clicked on 30, and I said, all right, so the pattern I want is the number of items is 30. So I added that to the URL I was looking for. And it still gave me 25. Like, it just didn't want to give me those last 25. And I thought that was annoying. So, but if how many does this one have? Oh, 26. I need a more popular movie. Dolphin Tale 2 just isn't really getting the critical attention. Dolphin Tale 1 really, yeah. So let's see, where's one that I've heard of that's probably, I bet a lot of people have reviewed this. Okay. 32 critics, not that many, but it'll do. Okay. Generally unfavorable reviews. That's too bad. Wow, that is a cast, though. Whoopi Goldberg and Megan Fox and Will Arnett. They're just like, spread it out. Okay. So let's see. So if I do critic reviews, and if I try 30 at a time, let's see what happens. 30 at a time. Now, I don't really, so I'll go down to the bottom, and this little strip down here has appeared, and you'll just have to trust me, that wasn't there before when all of them fit in one page. So I'm like, okay, I can check for this and click to the next one. And so I have review, critic reviews page equals 1. So when I clicked to the next one, I'm on page 1. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe before I was on page 0. Okay, let's see. Looks good. That actually loaded. That's awesome. All right, so the last ones I have are the Guardian and the Dissolve. And what happened? Good. So the last ones I have here are Dissolve, Guardian, Slant. Now what happens, all right, so sometimes you can just see what happens. I'm only getting 25 at a time. What if, instead of those 2 choices they gave me, I just kind of make up my own and say only 25? These are the links I go to not use Selenium. So I go down, and I only have 25. All right, and I get the same 30 here. And what happens on page 1? All right, so you see on page 1, I've got these again. So now I have all of, and then those 2 extra ones that weren't showing up on the first 30 pages. So now I can get the first 25 from the previous page, and the ones that I wasn't catching, those last ones, will be on num items equals 25 and critic reviews page equals 1. So I can go through, cycle through using their arguments and trick it into giving me all of them without having to resort to Selenium. Hooray! Okay, cool. So that's what I ended up doing, and you are welcome to explore this in more detail. And then I had to deduplicate those ones that I was getting twice. I'm not even sure if I got to that yet. So I have done that. All right, so then more parsing, just still, how's that still, where did Ninja Turtles go? Critic reviews for Ninja Turtles, okay. So then I am going through each of these and finding who it is, where they're from, what they scored it, what the date was, and starting to add those to my library. And you notice that I'm just using flat files for this. So if you think that you need to learn a database before you can start doing cool things with web scraping, that's not necessarily true. You know, Pickle is awesome. You just pull it back out, you have a dictionary, cycle through it, and it's fine. You can get a lot done without using a database at all. Cool. All right, so that concludes the part about going to any lengths to not use Selenium. And let's just briefly also use Selenium because I said we would. The good thing is, so the deal with preparing for this talk was actually kind of interesting because I did a ton of web scraping last summer. And for a project that we were doing, I didn't mention this, that I'm also a data scientist at Datascope Analytics in Chicago, and that's my main gig. Metis is our client, so right now I'm working as a course developer and instructor for them. But at Datascope, we had a project that we did quite a bit of web scraping for a client. And so I got really good at Selenium because everyone was using infinite scroll. And that's like one of the main cases when I need to do it is it says, okay, I'm not going to load the whole page. I'm going to wait till I know that you're reading everything. I'm not going to send all that content over the interwebs and pay for that if you're not even going to scroll down and look for it. And so there were so many cases where we needed to be able to and scrolling down is something that you really can't do without WebDriver. So both for the course and for this, I was like, man, people are really going to love knowing how to scroll down. And I was up one night, and I was like, so my task for the night is to find a couple great sites for infinite scroll and using Selenium. And like, it is completely gone out of fashion. Like completely gone out of fashion. Like I went to the ones that were my favorites from before, like the real tricky ones, and they'd changed how their design is. And I went and I Googled, sites that use infinite scroll, and I found a bunch of articles about how nobody uses infinite scroll anymore because it messes up their page rank and all their analytics. And so, I mean, the good news is that it's less frequent that you need to be able to do this. But the bad news is, like this last part of my talk and kind of how the title connects to it, it kind of blows at this point. But, everything works out in the end. So let me find my little Selenium starter. Wait. I have not. I knew that would happen too. I've never even heard of that. That's cool. Can I ask you a question? Are you from the land of Python or the land of R? The land of C. Yeah. So for me, my trajectory to where we are today is MATLAB to like Python to the end. I went to graduate school. I have a PhD in neuroscience, and so I was so excited when I found out about NumPy. I was learning Python, and there were all these times when I was just like, I just want to turn this thing on its side. And I was like, I just want to like sum all the columns, and I couldn't do that. So yeah, I find that people from different, one of the cool things about data work is that people come from a lot of different backgrounds. And I don't think there's any one perfect tool for any task. I think there are ones that feel more natural to different people. So pandas, I am getting way, way, way better at it now, and I'm really excited to check that out. Until very recently, it was something that I didn't really want to deal with. I also, the other cool thing, oh man, but like using just whatever feels good to do web scraping, I just had the coolest experience. I had someone contact me in Chicago, and he's working on a project for organic and local food growers. And he's working toward, being able to hook up growers and markets and make everything really cool. And as part of that, he told me he wanted me to look at his web scraping that he'd done in Google spreadsheets. And I said, I'll go to coffee with you, and I'm really curious what that means, right? And I thought that, I know that you can, like import a table. That I used that before when before I was really comfortable in Python. I wanted some information from a website, and Google Spreadsheets has a lot of cool functions, and you could, I forget what the function was called, but you could basically say, give me this table and an index, and it would fill in that spreadsheet with the table, with the nth table at the URL you said. And I was like, wow, that's cool. So I figured he'd done something kind of like that. And then he showed me what he'd done, and I was really blown away that he was doing web scraping in Google Spreadsheets, and he just hacked it together and made it work. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. Can you walk me through this? It was really cool. Yeah. Anyway, totally lost my train of thought, but there's another question. Go ahead. I have, yeah. In Selenium, in Selenium, you don't have kind of the flexibility to, so if you're moving on the fly, so you're like moving two objects in the DOM rather than in soup, I'm kind of like taking pieces and narrowing it down. So kind of the chaining doesn't work out in Selenium, and because you're just sort of each time looking at something different. And so learning, I'm sorry, my brain just rebooted in the middle of a sentence. No, actually, I have it somewhere. So this is a really cool tutorial for just this very thing. So using like LXML and XPath selectors, and they're very cool, actually. They are not as intuitive as some of the selectors in soup. In soup, you can just like build a dictionary and say, I want the tag to be this and the class to be this. But this makes a lot of sense. And I had some, there's a learning curve for it. I didn't know about this tutorial until 2 days ago, but it walks you through and shows you how to build a selector. I find them to be very powerful, and it's very easy to get exactly what I want very quickly once I'm up to speed in those. So I think that if you're working like in a team of different levels of ability and experience, I think that like the soup selectors are a lot more friendly. But I think as like an efficient tool, I think XML selectors might have a bit of an upper hand. Is that helpful? Yeah. Yeah, the W3 Schools one was the one I used before, and it helped me. But I was still doing like a few things. When you get to like the logical things, because you're going to be like building selectors that are saying like, give me the third son of the parent whose first son has a brother who has some text that says Fred, you know, but not if it has another brother that has an image in it. And so when you're dealing with, you know, kind of how the logicals worked, that I didn't think that the W3 Schools, I could like do it and then, you know, kind of fiddle with it until something worked. But I think that it didn't really teach me really what I was doing. But I think that it is that W3 Schools, and then it was like 30 selectors. Oh no, that was the CSS one. But yeah, they have the. I love being sidetracked. What'd you say? What was the question? There was another. Yes. I'm trying to not. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll put both of those up in there, and I think this is the other one that is really great too. Cool. All right. So where am I? Chrome driver. Install Selenium. Untitled. This is probably what I want. Could be dangerous. Okay, great. So I'm going to do just a quick one, and I'll include this too. Compile all of this, and probably if you go to my GitHub page, that's an easy way, and I'll tweet out where all this stuff is once they're, you know, ta-da. And I promise I won't like be a perfectionist and like work on making it really, really good and then never actually tweet it out. So I'll keep adding things to that same repo that you might have pulled and include this there. So just to get the Selenium gist. So the first rule of Selenium is try your hardest not to use Selenium, but it's actually also really fun. And all right, and what was I going to look at? So here we go. I had, you know, the first couple of times, yes, I had a lot of trouble getting it to work because it wants to know where everything is, and there we go. So if you didn't catch that was part of the magic happening. I said driver is webdriver.chrome, and I gave it its driver. And this is, if you look in the documentation, it doesn't say to do it this way. I had to there's a Stack Overflow question that helped me with whatever's wrong with whatever I did to my computer, get this to work anyway. And I'm looking at another movie site now, and this one's called Box Office Mojo. So that robot Chrome just showed up. I have several Chrome instances now, and the one I'm using as a human and the one that's being driven by WebDriver. So this is the really exciting part. I'm going to make sure you can see both things. So I'm going to get the URL. Oh my gosh. Okay. So driver is my web driver, and I told it to get this page. I don't know what that's about, but it's bugging me. Okay. All right. And kind of the same deal. So if let me get this. I have too many tabs. Story of my life. Put those away. Start again. All right. And I've got boxofficemojo.com. Okay. So what I want to do is, just as a mini example, is I want to search the site using my robot WebDriver. All right, so this one is great because it has a name. So if I don't know if I have my Selenium docs right here. Why wouldn't I do that? And there are different ways to select something. So if I want to find an element, I have a number of choices. So one of them is find element by name. And it's not often that one actually pans out, but for input boxes, you're usually in luck. So this one's called Q. Great. So I'm going to find this box on my site. I'm going to find it by its name. I'm going to look for Q, and then I'm going to type. Let me make this big too. I'm going to type in the box using the magic. So did you see that happen? Did everyone catch it? The box was empty, and now it has writing. And then I can click on this. So now I'm finding this is a CSS selector. I'm looking for an input, and its type is submit, and I'm going to click it. And it's going to work. Okay. I can also comment keys and Titanic. Yeah. Start over. No module name keys. What is it called? Help. Keys. Webdriver.com and keys. And it's not called return. Oops. Don't get mad at me. Keys class. Enter. All right, Freshie. Search. I did it. Yay. Okay, great. So similarly, you can also scroll around, and you can also execute JavaScript from here, which is kind of fun too. So I think for a future day, we can talk more about all the fun things to do with Selenium. And scrolling up and down is fun. It's not as fun as it was a year ago. The pages that nobody uses infinite scroll anymore, but it used to be that you could get around it by just like scrolling to the bottom, like finding the bottom from JavaScript and going down there and then waiting for a second and going down there and until it didn't work anymore and then getting everything. Now there's a lot of like dynamic swapping out. So instead of collecting all of this stuff, it'll replace the stuff. And then if you scroll back up, it'll be like whoo, 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 and switch it back around so that you don't know that it's disappearing or reappearing. So it's a bit fancier these days. And what Selenium comes with are these things called WebDriver weights. And they have like this vicious syntax weights. So explicit weights. So what I would want to do is to say I wanted something like the comments window. If I wanted the comments to load, I needed to wait for that. Maybe I have to go click on it. Comments are going to load. I'm going to wait for some element in some comments. It's like the last remaining vestige where this is really useful. So I'll go to a page and I'll say, show me the comments. And I will know what kind of element I'm waiting for. And so I'll say something ridiculous like WebDriver wait, and it has a timeout. Wait up to 10 seconds until, and then you import something called an expected condition. I have a kind of expected condition which is called the presence of an element is located. and then how by the ID, and then I use my dynamic element. And debugging those is something that I wish none of you have to do. Expected conditions can be things like, oh, here they are, whether, I mean, the ones that I use the most is that it's visible, that it exists, and then if you scroll, and so, but visibility includes like if it's within the actual window size of the pretend web driver that you're using. So they can get very, very, very tricky. So I think, you know, obviously my message of the Selenium part is to don't use Selenium if you can be tricky. You also feel really clever, like that loading 25 at a time trick. Like I got super, super pumped, like way more pumped than I would have if I'd made Selenium work. Anyway, I think that is the end of my prepared content, and I am happy to field any questions starting here. Oh, again? Have I dealt with single sign-on? No, I haven't. What's that? Oh, yeah, sure. So you're saying that Selenium might have an advantage if you are going between, you wouldn't have to deal with the authentication on the different sites if you had just done it once in a browser session? I think that I haven't done it before. I know that if you're dealing with a request, if you're dealing with a request package, that you can use, they do have, they handle auth, and you can keep the session alive and visit multiple pages. So I'm not sure if that is exactly the same thing, but it might be possible to do that in requests too. Other questions? Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, another thing, scraping is such like a case-by-case thing, and I really didn't quite get to like, I guess more of like a stream system of scrapers where, you know, for your, maybe for like a home project, you'd have like a cron job that runs every day and collects new information. Usually that's something that I've handled, like with the movies, you know, I think of what's like the easiest and most unique way to key something. Movie keys usually work out if you use just title and year. And then a lot of times URL will be a good way to check to see if something is already in your collection. And simple things like checking the length of the content to see if it's changed. And that's a nice thing to do. A lot of times, I mean, depending on the size of your project, you could do audits, you know, on a weekly or monthly basis and see if anything is new or updated and how you want to handle that depending on it. The most common case I can think of for that is when new comments are added to something that's ongoing. So you might have like an object for a news story, and you start out with, you know, you probably get it when it's super fresh, which is great, but then the conversation that goes on afterwards is lost. So you need a way to go back and revisit without, and you don't really want to duplicate the story, you just want to append more of the comments to it. There are packages, Scrapey is a great package that I've used before for handling this kind of thing. And if you notice, there was a pattern we kept doing where we would almost always, like we're visiting a site that generates, it's kind of like a parent, you know, where it has a list, and then we're going to each of the items. And so in the language of some of those packages, that's like a producer and a consumer, right? So you're producing different places to go to and then consuming the content at those places. And so that's like kind of a framework that's parallel through several different ways of handling it. So if you see that come up, then that might be familiar as well. But yeah, we've used Scrapey in the past to handle ongoing collection and updating of content. And that's something that I probably would like recommend a database for. So my opinion and experience is, so for my personal stuff, oh yeah. So what is my experience and my opinion on the legal, and I'm going to say / ethical side of web scraping? And I'll say, okay, so if it's for something for work, where it's not just me on the line, if I'm doing a project with my company, if I want to make a blog post, I would try to stay within the lines of what their policy is. And if it says don't do it, a lot of times I'll contact someone on the telephone. I'm right on the Gen X versus millennial border, so I actually have very little problem picking up a telephone and trying to find a human. And a lot of times you can get, depending on the place, a lot of places it's very easy. They're like, oh yeah, we don't care about, nobody's going to come after you for that. And you're like, okay, what's your name? Write it down, and then I'll proceed like that. If it's something more official, like if it were for a client, a neat thing to do is to make sure in the contract that you make with them that it needs like an honest discussion, but a lot of times large companies who want to collect this information find it valuable enough that they will take on whatever legal consequences may arise. So you say like, these sites really kind of don't want you to do that. So the thing we make for you might break, and then you'll have to pay us to like make it, to engage in an arms race with them if that should happen. And B, how about if you're the person who gets sued and not us? And those are conditions under which we would proceed with that. And I think that it's actually, when you're first approaching it, you can feel very nervous. I think pretty much every time I've been around someone web scraping on their first day and they get like a response code that's not, okay, they're like, oh my God, did we get banned? And like it just like feels like you're like really creeping around. And in my experience, there's very little, except for Google, there's very little caring about what you do. I think that actually people's content being used for other things, it's someone said that to me yesterday and I swallowed it, and now today it doesn't sound like it holds as much water. But there's a lot of cool stuff that happens, and I think that if you attribute your source and say I did this, and you call them and you send them an email, that it's a more open culture than one might expect. I mean, depending on the type of information that you're getting. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think I covered like fun projects and like doing work for somebody else. But yeah, what you bring up is like building, like trying to make money off of something like that. And in that case, I would take a completely different approach. And I don't have any experience myself with navigating that. So yeah, totally. But if it's like, hey, I made a cool viz or like a cool dashboard using your stuff that people can play with, and it's attributed, then usually I don't think that that's like going to incite lawsuits. Anything else? Okay, cool. You guys looked way like not as bored as I thought you would in this workshop, which was really exciting. So I hope that you got something out of it. And yeah, if you have future questions, come up to me or tweet me or anything like that. And thanks.